welcome into the Week 11 episode of Craze's Corner. Make sure you guys stay tuned. We're going to be talking about some fantasy football playoff matchups. We're going to talk about some favorable ones and some not so favorable ones. You're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that. But first, we're going to get into some news. So the Ravens have released Le'Veon Bell. With all the drama that's been surrounding him, he handled it fairly well. He went on Twitter, announced his release. There is still some hope that he may re-sign with the practice squad. He did clear waivers. So there is a chance he's back in Baltimore on the practice squad, but they didn't currently need him on the active roster. Maybe he'll sign somewhere else as well. He's going to be open for that. And then Miles Sanders the Eagles have opened up his 21-day practice off of IR, so they have 21 days where he can practice. And if they don't activate him to the roster before the 21 days are up, he will stay on IR for the entire season. Obviously, they're not going to let that happen, so he will be back soon. And he has begun practicing with the team in a limited fashion. And then the big story, which I think is controversial, is the Jets are going to start Joe Flacco this week. They're playing Miami. To me, this move really doesn't make any sense. I know they traded for him, but I think he's a better mentor for the quarterbacks than actually playing. They have Mike White, who had a bad week last week, I know, but they were playing the Bills. Obviously, Zach Wilson isn't quite healthy enough to play, but to me, starting Joe Flacco really doesn't benefit your team at all, except for it may give you a little bit better chance, but it doesn't let you see what Mike White has, give him the opportunity to bounce back. And currently, right now, it's where it's a sixth-round pick that they gave up for him, but if he plays more than 50% of the snaps in 4 games, that increases to a fifth-round pick. So say something happens to the quarterback situation later on in the season, and he ends up playing a few more games. That's something that the Jets are going to need to monitor because it could cost them a round in the draft, which could be big for a team that's trying to rebuild right now. What do you guys think about what the Jets are doing right now? Do you think it's a good move, trying to win, or would you have started Mike White going forward? I would have started Mike White, but let us know using the media app. It's a virtual press conferencing app that you can find on the Google Play and App Store. It's really good. There's a new version that's going to be coming out. You're going to be able to replace your background. It's going to be super interactive, and I definitely recommend you guys go check that out and let us know what you think about this Jet situation. It's available on the Google Play and App Store. All right, and now let's welcome in our guests. Tonight we have Will and Jeff. Welcome in, guys.
Always happy to be here, Zach.
All right, you guys have any thoughts on the whole Jet situation right now, starting Joe Flacco and they have Mike White? What are your thoughts?
Classic Jets. That's all. I was like, is Adam Gase still there? What's going on? Makes no sense at all. You have Mike White, who actually won a game for you. You know, it's the Bills. The team is horrible anyway. It's like, why not just go ahead and stick with him, especially like you said, Zach, which is a great point. If they play Joe Flacco and end up playing him over that certain amount of games, they're dropping from, giving up a fifth-round draft pick. For what? They're not winning anything this year. So I'm not – classic Jets. That's all I got to say. And then with Robert Salah getting into it with
Rex Ryan,
I'm like, dude, come on, man. Leave that alone. This first year is a dumpster fire. Look forward. I wouldn't even go ahead and start Zach Wilson. I would let him sit the rest of the season, man. I don't know what they're doing. But, again, I see why nobody really wanted to take that job.
Yeah, what do you think, Will?
Hey, the problem for the Jets is they took Wilson over, what's his name, with the Patriots, right?
Mac Jones.
And so 2 times a year they're reminded, that fan base is reminded that they once again seem to be able to do anything. And so, they're fourth. If the draft was small, they're fourth. I mean, I don't know. Does Joe Flacco maybe lose more games than he's worth? And are they trying to get in position for the number one pick? I'm surprised the more media is not. I guess let me step back. When Wilson is healthy, if Flacco's still starting, then you got a huge problem in that organization.
Mm. Yeah, I think that for fantasy purposes, I think Joe Flacco starting is a good thing. I think he brings up the value of guys like Michael Carter, Jameson Crowder, who are going to need to see the targets because he's going to be a check down king.
Yeah.
Coming out of the backfield there. But let's move on to what we're really here to talk about today, which is going to be playoff schedules. We're going to start off with some easy playoff schedules. We're going to be talking about the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends who we think have favorable matchups in weeks 15, 16, and 17 because those are going to be the most common weeks for playoffs. Make sure you guys check your playoff settings. I know some leagues, when you carried them over into this year, they didn't change the weeks for the playoffs, so they might still be 14, 15, 16, and you're probably going to want to change that now that it's an 18-week season. That's something I do in a couple of my leagues, so make sure you guys do check that out to ensure that you are going to be playing the playoffs when you actually expect to be playing them and not turn up this week and be like, oh, wait, the playoffs have started, so make sure you guys check that out. Let's start with our first quarterback. We're going to talk about Ryan Tannehill. He starts off with a pretty tough matchup. They play Pittsburgh in week 15. But from there, it gets a lot easier. They play San Francisco and Miami, who have both been giving up a lot of points to the quarterback position. And without Derrick Henry there, the offense is going to have to run through Ryan Tannehill. A.J. Brown has been great, and Julio Jones should be back by then. And since they put him on IR, he should be rested, healthy, and ready to go. So for me, I think depending on how things go, if Ryan Tannehill somehow has a couple down games or whatever, and you can pick him up off your waiver wire and stash him because you know you're going to be in the playoffs, I think that's a great move. And if he's on your roster, I'm keeping him on my roster because San Francisco and Miami he could really have huge games and put up some big numbers and win you one of your matchups. What do you guys think about Ryan Tannehill?
Go ahead, Will.
I think you're right, Zach. The schedule is nice because both of those games are home games. I mean, the 49ers and the Dolphins are home games for them. Only concern is about the weather, right? That would, to me, if that was a game, those two games are perfectly designed for Derrick Henry. They're gonna run the ball, let it be cold, snow, rain, doesn't matter. We're gonna run the ball, and Derrick Henry's gonna score you 50 points. I'm not sure who that is now for Tennessee, and I'm not sure what the value of the wide receivers are in maybe the two most important games of your fantasy season. And you're kind of guessing, like, are they going to throw the ball? Really? I'm just not sure. I think it's a bigger question mark than if they were both those games were on the road. I'd probably actually feel better about it.
See, I think being at home, they're in Tennessee, so it doesn't get too cold. So it's not like they're playing in Green Bay or Buffalo or anything like that. And I think San Francisco's offense is going to put up points. So they're going to have to throw the ball. McNichols is currently dealing with a concussion, which will obviously be fixed. But Foreman and Peterson both aren't great. They weren't on rosters for a reason. So I think that throwing the ball is going to be the only way that they can win games because I don't think Peterson and Foreman and McNichols can really wear down defense and sustain drives because you're not going to get 5 yards of carry where you can run it on first down, run it on second down, and then run it on third down. And I think the offense is going to have to be in Ryan Tannehill's hand. What do you think, Jeff?
I'd kill for Ryan Tannehill right now, especially in one of my leagues where I had to start Matt Ryan and Jared Goff last week.
Oh.
It was a 2-quarterback league. So Ryan Tannehill would be gold to me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, let's continue on there.
He's throwing the ball. That's what the offense is in his hands right now. It is not going through the running game since King Henry and there is no replacing King Henry. Unless they find a way to put Adrian Peterson in a time machine and circle him back about 15 years. But that's not happening. So, yeah, I think Ryan Tannehill is going to be good to at least get you anywhere from 18 to maybe 25, 23 points, which is good for me, which I would take as a starting quarterback in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And then we'll move on to the next guy, which is Dak Prescott. Obviously, they're in a high-powered offense, and then they play Week 15, the Giants, who haven't been able to stop anybody. Then they play Washington, whose defense opposed to the Tampa Bay game, which I think was a fluke game. They've been letting up a lot of points as well. And then Arizona's defense did just get exposed by my Panthers without a great quarterback, right? Because you had P.J. Walker starting the entire game. And I think that Dak will be able to take apart the secondary. And without J.J. Watt, the rush hasn't been the same as it was earlier on in the season. So for me, I know Dak, if he's on your roster, I think you feel really good about him moving forward. Do you guys anything opposed to Dak Prescott going forward?
No.
No?
Negative.
All right.
I like Dak. I think Dak. I think Cowboys are going to be rolling at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think so as well, because they're going to be going. They're going to be picking up steam going into the playoffs. They're going to be fighting for seeding, whether they're fighting for the 2 seed, fighting for the 1 seed, even if they keep winning. And the Giants, Washington, and Arizona could be a big game where it could have the playoff seeding implications
Exactly.
if Arizona can get back together. So it's going to be a game where they need to win, so they're going to put the ball in Dak's hands. But let's move on to a guy who Will actually brought up. We're going to talk about Cam Newton. The matchups aren't necessarily great, but I'll let Will start us off here.
It's slim pickings on the waiver wire right now. So like Jeff just said, there's not a lot of quarterbacks on the waiver wire in most leagues that could give you those 5 or 7 extra points. And I don't know. Watching Cam play, the few plays he played, he looked like he was ready to play. He looked like Cam, right? And so, if you have a spot on your roster, maybe you can play at the end of the season if you need a quarterback. And because I don't know if he starts this week and he puts up decent numbers, he's going to be off that waiver wire real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they play Buffalo, which I think is going to be negative for DJ Moore because Tre'Davious White's going to be on him. But I think what kind of makes Cam matchup proof is the rushing ability. And when they get inside the 5, Cam Newton's going to take the ball into his own hands, as they showed last week. And whether he's throwing the ball or running the ball, running a run pass option with just himself, no need for the running back there. And then even when a defense has a really good secondary, the Saints secondary has been pretty good. The underneath stuff with CMC is going to be enough where I think he will be good going forward. Any thoughts on Cam, Jeff? I know you were also big on him.
And that's what I expected him to do. Once you get into the red zone with Cam, it's pretty hard to stop him. And the thing that I love about it, with the Panthers, with their defense, now they look kind of reinvigorated.
Yeah.
So if they start turning the ball over or just stopping guys, man, we're not going to see Cam having to march the team down, a good 60 yards or so. We're going to see Cam probably marching these guys from the middle of the field. And I think with the weapons that he's got with the Panthers, I actually like the weapons that he has here better than the position he was with the Patriots. Mm-hmm. I think it's just a great setup all the way around for this dude to still go ahead and at least, even if he's touchdown dependent, that's better than a lot of other quarterbacks because he's going to either get it through the air on a little 5-yard pass or he's going to get it with his legs.
Yeah, and especially if you're in a 4-point lead for passing touchdowns, that makes Cam that much more valuable because he's going to get the rushing touchdowns. Looking at that offense, Sam Darnold had 5 rushing touchdowns, and he led the league at one point. So just imagine what a guy like Cam can do with his athleticism going forward. And obviously they've shown they're going to draw plays up specifically for him and add those into the offense last week. So I think they continue to do that going forward. But let's move on to the running back position. I think this first one, I think he's going to be a guy who's going to put up league-winning numbers. He's not available on any of your waiver wires, but Najee Harris has some 3 really good matchups. They play Tennessee, they play Kansas City, and then they play Cleveland. None of those teams have extremely strong linebacker groups. And the Steelers' offense now runs through Najee Harris. All three of those teams have been allowing big games to the running back position. And with his pass catching work, there's not going to be a linebacker on most of those teams that can stick with him, cover him. So he's going to be open there for the checkdowns from Ben. So for me, I think Najee Harris is going to be a guy that's going to be able to give you 20 points a week almost in the fantasy playoffs. So for me, that's really it. I don't think there's much to talk about there with Najee. I'm assuming both of you guys agree with that. Will was talking about trying to trade for him last week.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys have anything you want to chime in about Najee?
Nope, he is what I thought he was going to be at the beginning of the year. And that's the thing, even with bad quarterback play, Ben is still good enough to where if you try to stack the box, he can take a short pass to Deontay Johnson. So they have to be worried about that as well. So that's why, Najee is going to continue to do damage, whether they try to stack the box or if it's just a wide open, gap set defense. He's just going to get the ball as a receiver. He's going to get the ball, carries. He's just everything runs through him. So I don't see them I don't see a team stopping him. If the Bills couldn't do it, nobody else can do it.
I completely agree. Any thoughts, Will? You pretty much agree with everything.
I honestly, right now, I think he's number one running back in fantasy football.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And not that he's the most talented guy. I just think right now he's healthy. And he's playing, he's getting touches. The quarterback situation is iffy at best, and he's going to get more touches. And as the weather gets worse, he's going to get more touches. So, look, that's what I was saying. If you could trade for him last week, that was the time to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to a guy who I think probably has the easiest schedule I have ever seen for a running back in the playoffs here. The game script should be positive for him in the first two games. He's currently dealing with an injury, but he should be perfectly healthy by then. Talking about James Robinson for the Jacksonville Jaguars. First week they play Houston, and Houston has not played well at all this season, so I'm expecting more of the same. Their defense hasn't been very good, and they've been letting up a lot of points at the running back position, especially if the Jaguars can get up early. If they can score a touchdown or two, they're just going to be running James Robinson into the ground, especially since Travis Etienne is going to be coming back next year. So they don't really need him, so they can just run the ball with James Robinson all day. After the Houston game, they play none other than the New York Jets. So it's going to be more of the same there. And then they play New England, who does have a good defense, and the offense has been playing well, but they've still been letting up. They've been getting exposed in the running game because their linebacking core hasn't been as good as expected, and their defensive line has been better against the pass than against the run. For me, those are three really easy matchups, and for a guy who's already shown that he can be an RB1, if your trade deadline's still open, someone may be a little worried about the injury currently because he didn't practice with a knee injury, and then he just recovering from another injury. So if you can try finesse your way to getting James Robinson on your team if you're going to make the playoffs, those three matchups, he should be putting up numbers that won't be quite as high as Najee's, but they will be close.
Yeah.
James, imagine him on. I'm just trying to think. Imagine him on some of these other teams and what his value would be.
Like the Chiefs.
Scary. Oh.
If he was on the Chiefs, he would be by far the number one running back. The passing work would be there. The touchdowns would be there. Yeah, there's a lot of teams where he would be in a better position. But even in Jacksonville, it's not a bad position because he is by far the number one running back. It's not like he's in a committee.
Right.
For me, I think
even with the injury, he still had a good game. That's the type of running back you want right there, man.
Yeah.
So, I'm buying on him.
Yeah, and then
I'm mad to trade for him before the trade deadline. So, see what happens.
Yeah, and then let's move on to some wide receivers. So quarterback I've seen who people have been throwing around was Jalen Hurts. I'm not in love with Jalen Hurts come playoff time, but I am absolutely in love with my guy Devonta Smith. I was able to trade for him in one of my big leagues before the trade deadline and before his big explosive week. I was looking ahead at his playoff schedule, and he gets the opportunity to play Washington not once, but twice, as well as playing the Giants. So he should be able to continue his hot streak. They have some favorable matchups in between now and then as well. And those 3 games, he's not going to be stopped. He's going to be able to be open with his route running and his athleticism. And Sirianni has shown the past couple weeks that they want to get him the ball and they want to get him involved, which I said they needed to do. And I think he must be watching the show or something, because he seemed to be listening to me. And Devonta Smith's been really involved the past couple weeks. So for me, I think he could be a guy like a sneaky league winner where he could be on a lot of championship rosters, because people were looking to sell when he was having those few back-to-back bad weeks. But for me, it's got to be my top guy who's not really, a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 is going to be Devonta Smith. You guys both excited about the way he's being utilized now, and obviously those matchups are great.
Yeah, how he's being utilized now. I have him in one of my leagues, and unfortunately I started him when he gave me 2 points. So I've had him on the bench the last couple of times. He's put 20 up, and I'm just like, so now I'm like, okay, we're going away from running the ball to now, and he's actually looked great though. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's looked poised. His routes have been just great, and then even some of the catches that he's made. So, yeah, I'm not mad at starting Devonta Smith, man, and or even trying to even pick him up from somebody that's willing to let him go.
Yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on Devonta Smith, Will?
If you look, not just the last 3 weeks, I mean, after this week with the Saints, they're Giants, Jets, Washington, Giants, Washington.
Yeah, like I said, it's favorable across the board.
Schedule. Right, that might be the easiest fantasy schedule in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, which made me, I was actually debating putting Miles Sanders up there. I want to see him come back from the injury before I fully jump on that train, but if you can buy low on him as trade deadlines approach, if yours hasn't passed, he's a guy I would look into because the matchups are favorable.
Hey,
and
Jeff,
the Eagles...
They're the quarterback for you. I mean, Giants, Jets, Washington, Giants, Washington.
Yeah, like I said, I think Hurts could have some good games. I'm just not fully confident because I think he's got the ability to put up some duds, which you can't afford come playoff time. Let's move on to Keenan Allen. You can throw Mike Williams into this as well. They play KC, whose defense has been bad against the pass. They play Houston. Herbert should be able to throw all over Houston's defense. And then they do play Denver, but Denver's secondary, their corners have looked lackluster as opposed to what they were supposed to be in the offseason. Pat has looked great, the rookie corner out of Alabama. But we'll see how they do. But yeah, I'm excited about Keenan Allen's playoff matchups as well. I think that the first 2 are definitely favorable. And I don't think the Denver matchup is as scary as some people may think it is. Are you guys a little worried about the Denver matchup, or?
Depends on which Denver shows up. The Denver that played Dallas or the Denver that just played this last week. That's my thing. But Keenan Allen is consistent. If nothing else, he's consistent. I have him in one league. I have Mike Williams in the other league, and I'm kind of like out on Mike Williams right now. You just seem to like, what's going on. But Keenan Allen, he's consistent if nothing else. So I would trust him.
Yeah, that's why I picked him over Mike Williams, because I think that no matter what happens, he's still going to see the points. What do you think, Will?
Just depends if the Teddy Bridgewater defense is playing or not, because after that whiff of, I get it, it's your starting quarterback.
Yeah, you as a guy who's...
No, you could at least got in the... I don't know, man.
He's not their franchise quarterback by any means. They need to win games if they want to make the playoffs. So if they miss out on the playoffs because of one game, I think they could have won that game depending on if certain things changed out a little differently. So that could come back to haunt them. But let's move on to.
Not Teddy Bridgewater the rest of his career. I honestly
After
like.
I didn't hold it against him. I was like, he shouldn't even be playing football right now. So I
get it, man, but fans, you know how fans are, Jeff. Fans will never. I understand what Teddy was saying. His knee, you're right. It just doesn't look good.
He said himself he should have gone for the tackle. Afterward, he said he was kicking himself for not going after it and for being scared. And he said he should have done it because he wants to help his team win no matter what the circumstance is. So we'll see if that changes his mentality going forward. Hopefully, for him, he's not throwing too many interceptions, so he shouldn't have to. Maybe that changes. Maybe he's like, well, I don't want to have to tackle anyone, so maybe I just don't throw any more interceptions. We'll see how that works out in Denver. But let's talk about Robbie Anderson, who's another guy that Will brought up. I'll let you talk about Robbie Anderson here.
Look, to me, it's all about waiver wire. When you look at the waiver wire, is there somebody you can bring on your roster right now to replace the bottom of your roster? Like, I've been holding on to Justin Gage all season, thinking, hey, at some point, he'll be at least the number 2. And today I let him go and put Robbie Anderson on my roster because I just think Robbie Anderson, I don't think it's coincidental. This guy hasn't done crap all season. And all of a sudden, Cam Newton walks in the building. This guy is scoring 13 fantasy points. I just think there's a relationship there. There's a comfort level that all of a sudden Robbie seems interesting. Because where was this 5 weeks ago? I mean, Zach, when I was watching the Viking game, they kept dropping passes and they were wide open. It wasn't like
I remember the drop passes.
So there's a different vibe with Carolina right now, and you're not going to get Stafford. You're not going to get more, but you can get in your waiver wire. Cam Newton sitting there and Robbie Anderson sitting there, and why at the bottom of your roster? Why not?
Yeah, Cam brings the energy that we saw in 2015 with the Panthers when they went 15-1. He's bringing that energy back. Obviously, the defense is great, and what I like about Robbie is, so they do have some tougher matchups with Buffalo and New Orleans, but Tre'Davious White and Marshawn Lattimore are going to be locked up against DJ Moore the entire time, leaving Robbie Anderson theoretically with the opportunity to be the number 1 target on the team because DJ Moore's going to be going up against the best corners. So that should open things up a little more for Robbie, and obviously, Cam's going to be Cam. I think he's going to be smart with the ball. That's what we saw. He's going to go for the open guy, and I don't think he's going to try to force it to DJ Moore. I think DJ Moore is still going to be a great option for the playoffs against Tampa Bay. I think DJ Moore will probably do really well. New Orleans and Buffalo, I think it will be harder sledding. He'll still be able to get you, 10 points, whatever, but I think Robbie Anderson is going to have the higher upside. But let's move on to the tight ends. There's not too much I want to talk about here. I just want to reinforce Darren Waller. He plays Cleveland, Denver, and Indy. All 3 of those are going to be pretty good. All 3 of those have been letting up fantasy points against the tight end so far this season. And Darren Waller's Darren Waller. He's an absolute monster on the field. I think if you have him, some people are a little concerned with everything that happened on earlier in the season. But going forward, keep him in your starting lineup. I was debating TJ Hawkinson. I wanted to put him here just to reassure people who had him and started him last week, but his playoff matchup isn't actually great. But I think going forward, TJ Hawkinson will be a guy you can continue to start. I think that him having no receptions was a one-game fluke in a game where they almost won somehow against the Steelers. So you guys both still confident with Darren Waller?
Oh, with Waller, yeah. I'm not touching any lion. If there's a lion on my roster, it's a mistake.
Exactly. I second that. Anybody that catches passes from Jared Goff, I'd rather catch. I'd put you in my lineup. Jared Goff is, man.
All right, let's move on to some of the harder playoff schedules now. I think these are going to be some players who you may be starting week in, week out. Some guys you're kind of flexing. So we're going to talk about, they obviously all have tougher matchups, but what we think you will be able to expect from them come playoff times. We're going to start with the quarterback positions. We're going to start with Carson Wentz, who plays New England, Arizona, and the Raiders. I think Carson Wentz is a very streamable quarterback rest of season when he has good matchups, but come your fantasy playoffs, New England's defense has looked great against the pass. Arizona's defense has been pretty good outside of last week, so, I'm confident with Dak against Arizona. With Carson Wentz against Arizona, not so much. The weapons aren't really there. So he has to make the plays as opposed to Dak and just throw it to CeeDee Lamb, and CeeDee Lamb will make the plays. And then the Raiders have actually been surprisingly good against the pass so far. We'll see if that continues. Obviously, they struggled last week against Patrick Mahomes, but then again, that's Patrick Mahomes, not Carson Wentz. So for me, I'm leaving Carson Wentz off my team come playoff time. And I don't really think, if Cam Newton's on your waiver wire, I'd much rather have Cam Newton come playoff time than Carson Wentz. You guys both out on Carson Wentz as well with those matchups?
Yeah, especially the way that Jonathan Taylor's running right now. I think it's just going to be feed him the rock, and they're going to utilize him like Derrick Henry. If anything, there'll be dump-offs, but Wentz is a guy that can go from 100 to 2 in a second, in one game, man. So I wouldn't trust him.
Yeah, we saw 2 last week. Man, that game had, I know Jacksonville's not been bad, but that should have been a big win last week for Carson Wentz, and it wasn't. And I'm still sore because he cost me a game. I thought.
I mean, at least they didn't lose like the Bills did, right? So that's got to count for something.
Yeah, but I'll give Josh Allen a bad game. Carson Wentz, he played. You talk about a guy that plays down to the competition. That's exactly what Carson Wentz.
He fit right in with those Pittsburgh Steelers, eh?
Oh yeah, maybe Pittsburgh.
That's been Mike Tomlin's only problem throughout his career is he always plays down to the competition and they lose games that they should easily win. So when Ben retires, throw Carson Wentz in there, he fits perfect.
But I will say it was Mason Rudolph. As soon as they announced that, this is a winnable game for Detroit.
Yeah, I thought Detroit was going to win because it's Mason Rudolph, but Detroit has been so bad and they didn't play good against the Steelers. The defense should have been able to hold the Lions to under 16 points. And then the whole overtime situation was absolutely atrocious on both sides of the ball. You can't afford to fumble. The Steelers should have easily won that game even there if Freiermuth didn't fumble the ball. So to me, I think that's unacceptable. And that is just playing down to your competition. But let's move on to another quarterback who Will does not like. So he's going to love this pick right here. But Baker Mayfield, he's in the same boat. He plays Las Vegas. And then after Las Vegas, he plays Green Bay, who's been really good against the pass. Plus, they're going to get Jair Alexander back. And then he plays Pittsburgh. So that week 15 to 17 are terrible matchups. I'm same boat with Carson Wentz. I don't think there's any way he's cracking my starting lineup. Even in 2 quarterback leagues, I'm looking other ways. I'm looking Cam Newton. I'd even be tempted to go with some other guys off the waiver wire over Baker. So yeah, for me, Baker's not going to be on any of my rosters come fantasy football playoffs. And I don't think he should be on yours. You guys both feel the same. We'll let Will go first since we know Will already doesn't like Baker.
Hey, Jeff, in your 2 quarterback league that you're hurting, Baker is playing the Lions this week at home. You start if you can get him. Are you starting him?
This week.
Just this week. I'm just talking about this.
Just this week, yeah.
Just this week.
But he might not even play this week.
Exactly.
They're saying he's going to play and everything, but with the knee contusion, the shoulder injury, at what point do you say, all right, you can have a week off. We need you healthy to try and make a push near the end of the season.
But real quick, I just realized, look at Cleveland's schedule. Am I reading this right, or is this a mistake? So they play the Lions, then they're at the Ravens, and they're home for the Ravens. They play the Ravens back-to-back weeks.
Do they have a bye in there though?
Oh, they do.
Yeah, that's
You're
what I
right.
thought. Yeah, so they do play the Ravens back-to-back weeks, but they have the bye in there. So it's same situation with the Eagles where they play them, or with the Eagles play the Washington, and then the Panthers play the Bucks twice near the end of the season. Not sure what the NFL's got going on with schedules this year, but they seem to like to do that near the end of the season.
Yeah.
Pretty close games there. But let's move on to the running back position, and then we'll get into the wide receivers and tight ends, because these are guys who you're pretty much starting every week now. But they do have some tougher matchups to watch out for, so you kind of have to temper your expectations. We're going to start with Leonard Fournette. He's been off to a really, really hot start. He's been the number one running back by far for a Tom Brady-led offense. He plays New Orleans, who is historically and currently really good against the run. Then they play Carolina, whose defense now looks amazing, especially with Shaq Thompson. Now that he's back from injury, he's been back for a couple weeks. And they've been stuffing the run outside of James Conner's touchdown last week. They pretty much held the Cardinals in check running the ball. And then he does have a favorable matchup against the Jets in the championship. But if you can't get to the championship, it doesn't really matter. So
Exactly.
that's why I added him in here, because I think you have to temper his expectations. I think he will be touchdown dependent against New Orleans and against Carolina. So just make sure that you're going to start him, but make sure that your other guys are going to have to pick up his slack, because there's a chance he puts up 6 points in one of those two games. So you got to make sure your team is built to pick up that slack. What do you guys think about Leonard Fournette? Do you think that the volume is going to equate to enough fantasy points for you don't have to worry about that? Or are you worried about the matchups there as well as maybe some game script?
Both the matchup and volume. His volume is not that great, so we know that I throw the ball. So that's why I've kind of been out on all of the Bucks running backs.
Yeah.
For most of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think as the Buccaneers get near the end of the season, it becomes more and more Tom Brady. Now, I do think there's a chance though that you could have someone like Fournette, 10 carries, 3 yards a carry, but 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Because Tom does like to go to that running back near the goal, near the touchdown. So if it's like first and goal or second and goal at the 2.
Yeah, that's why I said I think he's going to be touchdown dependent.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the yardage is going to be there where it has been earlier on in the season. He's been getting some yards. But when you're playing New Orleans and Carolina, which are both also divisional games, which sometimes make it harder,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough for him. Let's move on to another guy where Nick Chubb is a guy who's your running back, most likely your running back 1. But he plays Las Vegas, Green Bay, and Pittsburgh. And Green Bay and Pittsburgh have had really good defenses. And the Raiders have been week to week. They'll have 1 week where their defense looks amazing, and next week where their defense looks terrible. So I think that Las Vegas matchup doesn't really concern me at all. And then the Pittsburgh matchup's going to be a colder weather game, so it should be good. But that means the Steelers are going to be able to, crush down on that. They know they're going to be running the ball. Kareem Hunt will be back by then as well. So for me, I think you have to temper your expectations with Nick Chubb. I don't think you can expect these 20 to 30-point weeks that he's been having. And I think you have to get more into that 15-point range, which is where I think you're going to get. And I think you have to be able to accept that with your team. If your trade deadline hasn't passed yet, maybe he's a guy you'd look to move for someone with a more favorable matchup if you're in playoff position right now. Because they also have their bye coming up as well, which we talked about with Baker. So maybe you look to move him, even if you're not in playoff contention, to gain that extra week of a couple players. If you do a 2-for-1, get some more players in return for him. But yeah, that's where I'm at with Nick Chubb. You guys both think the Kareem Hunt thing is concerning when he comes back, as well as the tough matchups, or you think that he's going to still see the 20 carries, which the Browns are going to have to do if they want to be competitive in games, is give him 20 carries a game. and then hope that equates to fantasy football value.
Right. I'm going with all of the above. The fact that the schedule is a little bit tough. Green Bay has actually been looking really, really good. As far as Pittsburgh is always playing them tough, and this could be a game for, possible wild card implications or whatever would have you. And the thing is, Chubb is not healthy. That's the other thing. So now you got Kareem Hunt possibly coming in. Chubb is not healthy. He's probably a game away from being back on the sidelines again. It's kind of hard because he was a high draft pick, and it's almost like you're going to be forced to play him. But I might even be looking. If I was a Chubb owner, possibly what I could get for him for somebody that does have a little bit, like a James Robinson or something like that. I would go with a more of a unsexy running back that I know is going to get points.
Because you can probably trade Chubb for Robinson plus right now.
Yeah.
So you can get Robinson, a wide receiver, and then gain the playoff matchups. For me, that's definitely something I would look into if I'm the Chubb owner. What are your thoughts, Will?
It's interesting because I don't know if 3 or 4 weeks ago we were having this discussion, we'd be talking about that, but I think everybody's starting to wonder about Cleveland just a little bit, especially with Odell being gone, and
Odell's gone, the team falls apart,
And then the story today is they were from infighting with the wide receivers. So it makes me wonder about just what's the production going to be by Cleveland as a team down the stretch.
Yeah, for me, I started questioning what's going on with the Browns when they didn't trade Odell, and then they ended up just releasing him. I was like, what exactly is going on here, guys? Like, you could have got something in return, and to me, that just shows that they weren't quite ready, and they weren't able to adapt and handle the situation at hand. For me, if I have Chubb, trying to move him, but obviously if you can't get value for him, you got to keep him. He's going to get 20 carries.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the wide receivers here. I guess we'll move on to another running back. Somehow he got jumbled up with the wide receivers, but Michael Carter for the Jets. He's been a flex option so far. He's been pretty good this past 3-4 weeks. They play Miami, Jacksonville, and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is notoriously good against the run. And Jacksonville's defense hasn't actually been too bad against the run. Their pass defense has been fairly bad, but they've been able to stop some running backs. And then Miami it's a week-to-week team. Sometimes their defense looks good. Sometimes their defense looks bad. So Carter might be able to put up some points in Miami. And then when Jacksonville comes, just drop a little bit. And then when they're playing Tampa Bay, the way to expose Tampa Bay is through the air. And we all know the Jets aren't going to be able to expose Tampa Bay because they are the Jets. But I think Carter in your fantasy football championships, because if you make it that far, that is your most important week. There's only one game that defines your season at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm comfortable putting Carter in my lineup against Tampa Bay right now. What about you guys?
I was thinking that same thing until this week happened. Because something happens when you're blowing out the Jets, all of a sudden garbage time becomes a freaking factor. So now, headed toward the playoffs, I think a lot of these teams, if they're up, say by 21, they're pulling guys out, and then they'll let Michael Carter or Elijah Moore or somebody like that, like I just lost this last week because of that. They will let these guys score in garbage time, man. So if you don't have, I would say in a flex, maybe just watch and see what's happening. If these guys are continuing to score in garbage time, Michael Carter, you never know. 2 touchdowns because they're getting blown out by 30. 2 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. If I was the Jets, once you're down by that much, I think you start to give Carter less reps because he's your future at the running back position, but they're the Jets, so they won't. But yeah, I get what you're like. Theoretically, Yeah, they should, start to give him less and less reps as they get more and more down, but they won't.
Nope.
But yeah, I still think he will be touchdown dependent, and I'm not going to count on the Jets to score, even against Tampa Bay's backup defense. I'm still taking Tampa Bay's defense to be able to outperform Zach Wilson, Mike White, or who knows? Maybe it'll even be Joe Flacco by that time. We really don't know. So for me, if you can sell high, if you haven't passed your trade deadline and he's in your lineup, if you can sell high on him right now, that is something that interests me. But if you have him, depending on who you have, you might have to flex him. And as Jeff said, you might get those garbage times touchdowns. What do you think, Will?
Well, it's interesting because we were talking about at the start of the show about Joe Flacco and kind of what the Jets doing. I do think there is a conscious effort by the current coaching staff not to be a top 5 draft pick. I think they believe the only way to get out of the hole that the Jets are in is to try to finish strong and play the whole game and not let that loser mentality seep in so early to the new coaching staff. They can't. I don't think this coaching staff can afford for their long-term success in keeping their jobs to start their first year at 2-15. They got to get to like 5 wins if they're going to build and attract free agents and get people to want to play there. And so, because why else play Joe Flacco? There's no reason to play Joe Flacco unless the coaching staff is trying to not have a complete meltdown in that locker room. So that goes to Jeff's point. I think they're going to play hard the whole game, and they're going to leave the running back. They're going to leave everybody in, and they're going to try to score whenever they can score. And if that's 17 points in the last part of the game, so be it.
Yeah, I think Carter will probably average around 12 points per game through that Miami, Jacksonville, and Tampa Bay game, which could be good at a flex, but I also think that could be detrimental because I think the Miami game he'll be really good. He might put up 20, and then the Jacksonville and Tampa Bay game he might kind of go up and down depending on the quarterback situation, which we very well know could change at an instant, so it's just kind of making me hesitant. We have 2 more guys I want to talk about, a wide receiver and a tight end. Wide receiver, I've got Scary Terry McLaurin. He will be matched up against Philadelphia twice, which will be Darius Slay, who's looked really good the past couple weeks. And I think going forward, he's a lockdown corner. So that matchup worries me, especially since they play him week 15 and week 17. And then Dallas hasn't been letting up too many points, and that's who they play week 16. I think Terry may be able to break that one big play because obviously Trayvon Diggs is going to jump some routes, but he's also going to miss some while he's trying to jump some routes, and I think they'll put him against Terry. So the Dallas matchup doesn't concern me quite as much as the 2 Philadelphia matchups do because I think by that time Philadelphia will be in a point where I think they will be contending for a wild card spot. They looked really good last week, and their matchups are, as we talked about earlier, they're extremely favorable. They're not playing some great teams. So I think they're going to be focusing on running the ball, big plays with Devonta Smith, and Slay's going to be locking down whoever the opposite he's going to be following. He's going to be shadowing Terry throughout both games, I think. And I think it'll be close games as well. So it's not like Philly's just going to give up or Washington's just going to give up. So I'm a little worried about Terry. I think you still start him because I think the volume will be there, but temper your expectations for Terry McLaurin going forward when it comes to playoff times, week 15, 16, and 17. Are you guys worried about the Darius Slay matchup as much as I am, or you guys still think, Scary Terry's going to do his things, he's going to get open, and he'll see, that 18 to 20 range, where I kind of see him more in that 12 to 15 range?
Will, you want to take this one?
18. I honestly look. That game last week was a great game for Washington. I mean, they played, and so I think he's a 15 to 20 point guy. Because I get Darius Slay and all that, but I mean Philadelphia's been up and down too. So, it's just which Philadelphia is going to show up and which Jalen Hurts is going to show up, and so we'll see. I'm not as down on Terry as I am some of the other guys.
Right. But the thing I was looking at, I'm wondering after this last game, they go ahead and let Heineke, still be Heineke. Because it seemed like after a couple of losses, they were like, no, we got to get to running the ball. You're throwing the ball too much. But I think after this game, maybe Rivera goes ahead and still allows him to get the ball out, get it downfield. And I'm thinking Terry McLaurin might be all right. Scary Terry might be decent. But I understand what you're saying, Zach. If you got a better option,
yeah, I think you just gotta. I don't think you can sit him.
Right.
As Will said, they had a really good game against Tampa, but he only scored 8.5 points, which isn't great. And that was in a good game, and that was by far their easiest matchup for the rest of the season. They played Carolina, Seattle, Las Vegas, Dallas, Philly. And all of those teams have been pretty good against the wide receiver position. Specifically talking about the Philly-Dallas. Philly's been one of the best defenses against the pass because they've been down in some games, teams have been running, but also because I'm confident with Darius Slay's ability to keep Terry to that 3 to 6 reception range, and if he doesn't score like he didn't against Tampa, you're going to see some down weeks. So I think you start him, obviously, but don't be like Will said, you see him in that 15 to 20 point range, and I can see him getting there, but I think it's going to be more in that 12 to 15 range. I'm calling that as my shot. He very well could expose, but I think the Eagles are actually a team who's going to get hot. Jalen Hurts has been spending some time with Peyton Manning, analyzing his film, which is obviously going to help with the passing game and the leadership abilities. I see why you're shaking your head over there, but their matchups right now, they don't.
I'm with you, Zach, on paper, but as we always say, division games are tough. And just because it's the Giants in Washington, and especially I don't think Washington's a rollover, man. They have some injuries now, but Washington's not a rollover in any of those games.
If they play the Saints, they'll beat the Saints. I think they beat the Giants. They'll beat the Jets.
Well, I don't know if they beat the Saints. That Saint defense.
I can't trust the Saints offense, and we don't know if Kamara's going to play, so I think they beat the Saints for sure. I think they get rolling, and once a team gets rolling, we've seen teams that aren't great get rolling. The morale gets high, and then they continue on. I think they'll probably just miss out on the playoffs. But I think they're definitely a team that people need to watch out for because no one's really – you're talking about the Eagles. You're like, oh, the Eagles, easy win. Whoever's playing against the Eagles, you're like, oh, we can easily beat the Eagles. But to me, they showed last week when they went into Denver, who had literally just torn the top off of Dallas, and they absolutely smothered Denver 30-13. I think people need to start respecting the Eagles a little more. I still don't fully trust their coaching staff as much as I'm talking up the Eagles. I do not trust Nick Sirianni. This could very well come back to bite me. But yeah, I think the Eagles will be in that situation, and I think Slay will be able to contain Terry in both those games. So that just makes me a little bit concerned. But let's move on to our last player we're going to talk about tonight. It's a tight end where I don't think you can sit him because I don't think you're going to have many better options. But Kyle Pitts plays San Francisco, Detroit, and Buffalo. San Francisco has been pretty good. They have a really good. What's his name? Their middle linebacker for San Francisco.
Fred Taylor.
Fred Warner. It's Fred Warner. Fred
Warner.
Warner. Who is?
We're thinking Jacksonville.
Who's literally one of the best linebackers in coverage over the past few seasons. Detroit is a team where the Falcons will probably get up, and I think that's a really positive matchup for Cordell Patterson. And then Buffalo is a really, really good defense. So we'll see. You'll see what you get out of Kyle Pitts. I don't really think you're going to be picking anyone up off the waiver wire and be like, oh, I want to start this guy over Kyle Pitts. But don't be expecting Kyle Pitts to be the guy that wins you your matchups. Just expect him to be that guy who's going to get you some targets. That 10 points PPR, but you got to start him because there's not better options. He's got the upside. But don't be expecting him to be like, oh, he's the X factor on my team. He's going to be the reason why I win my fantasy football championship this year. You guys both feel the same way with those matchups?
Yeah, San Francisco, Detroit, I might start him. But that Buffalo game, I'm definitely not starting him.
Yeah.
I would try to see if there's a Conklin available or, hell, I might even go back with Pat Fryermuth again and just hope he's learning to catch the ball this time.
Yeah.
I am not starting him in that game at all against Buffalo. After seeing what happened last week with Dallas, there's no way.
Can you imagine that game January 2nd in freaking Buffalo? I don't know if you could play any Falcon that day.
Cordero Patterson.
No,
it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter because they're going to be down. We know that they're going to be down against Buffalo. And the short dump-off passes are where Cordero Patterson makes his bread. And he's going to see a bunch of short dump-off passes.
Oh, he may get 50 points on receptions, but he's not getting any yards or touchdowns.
No, I don't care about that. When he gets me 10 receptions, and say he gets 10 receptions, 20 yards, whatever, couple yards through the ground, that's still a pretty good week in fantasy because he's going to be able to make some guys miss. It's going to be cold. He's going to be wet because it's going to be snowing. He's going to be slippery. He'll make some guys miss. He probably won't score, but he's the only Falcon I am actually excited for come playoff time.
And there's some things that I have him on a couple of my teams, and he always finds a way to score. I'm not trusting it against Buffalo. Yeah. Honestly. I'm just after what Dallas just did to them, they were down. So that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Of course he ended up hurting his ankle, but I'm like, garbage time, they're gonna have to do something. I'm still thinking Matt Ryan's at least gonna pull out one touchdown. So I'm like, if Dallas did that to him, not only are they playing against one of the best defenses in the league, they're also playing against the weather if they're playing in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And it's Matty Ice throwing in that weather.
Matty Ice. He's got to be good in the cold, right? Ice, cold goes together.
No. Hey, let's also think too. If you're Atlanta and you're out of the playoffs for that game, you may not play Matty Ice in that game.
Nah, he's playing.
I don't know, man.
He's done way too much for the Falcons.
Look.
I think it's the same situation as Ben, where you were talking earlier about if the Steelers go down, do they switch off of Ben? They can't switch off of Ben. The Falcons can't switch off of Matt Ryan. They really don't have anyone behind Matt Ryan either, so it's not like they have a rookie quarterback like they just drafted a Justin Fields who's eager to come off the bench or Trey Lance or anything like that.
What worst thing the Falcons can do is get Matt Ryan hurt that last couple of weeks. Because there's going to be a trademark. He's not going to be with Atlanta next year.
He might retire after this season, to be honest.
Did he say he's retiring after this season?
No. I just have a feeling he might. That team's not going anywhere.
No.
Sure, if he can get traded somewhere else, but I think with guys like Aaron Rodgers being bigger names, he's going to go to the more quarterback-needy teams.
He might go to Washington.
Maybe. We'll see. They could also draft a quarterback and then... He won't be in Carolina. Carolina's going to... My boy Cam Newton's coming back to Carolina after the season. Don't you worry. We're going to re-sign him. When we were talking with Cam, we wanted to sign him to a 2-year deal. And he wanted the 1-year deal so he can come back next year. We'll pay him some more. He'll come back. We'll have him with Sam Darnold being paid $18 million to sit on the bench.
There it is.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Anyways, I want to thank you guys for joining the show, and I want to thank everyone for watching. Make sure you guys tune in next week. You can find our Instagrams along the bottom of the screen. I'm at Pro Football Craze, and you can find media at Media MPC. Make sure you guys are staying tuned for the app. We will be dropping the new version, updated. It's going to be great. We're going to be pushing it on my account and their account. You're definitely going to want to check that out because it's going to be huge. But yeah, thanks for watching. Make you guys tune in next week.
All right. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.